Do you know the story of Robinson Crusoe? And I don't think I fully understood Robinson Crusoe's culture. Because I don't understand the story. I'll tell you why. Robinson Crusoe, you know the gist of it. Shipwrecked by himself, had tools, shipwrecked onto an island that was, other ships had left goats behind so that they could, show up there and there'd be plenty of food for them to, slaughter a bunch of goats. And it's like seeding. There was a lot of thought and early exploration that the world needed to be seeded and treated like a garden. So he shows up on this island, and it's pretty ideal. He's got tools, got raw materials, has an abundance of food. And he settles in and makes a life for himself. But during this time, especially coming off a ship where you're used to dealing with a large amount of humanity and relying upon that, the schedules and the regular food, and all your wants and needs are met. And creatures of habit, So, even after he established himself, and he always would have been waiting to be rescued. He always would have been looking out at the ocean. He knew that rescue was inevitable, just a matter of time. And then he established that he could go the distance. So it was just, enjoy life as best you can and just wait for people to eventually show up to harvest goats. So eventually people did show up, and they were amazed, amazed that he could survive. And one of the things that they found remarkable was he showed them how he caught goats, and he basically chased them. He was in fantastic shape. The guy could chase a goat down. And so they signed him on for the voyage. Now, in these voyages, you get alcohol as a regular part of your pay. Alcohol and tobacco is part of your daily pay. Now, shipboard life, for instance, if someone was not necessarily a drinker for whatever reason, they can't handle it, they'd trade their alcohol for tobacco. Or if there's a special occasion, like someone's birthday, people would automatically donate whatever, they'd have half their grog or whatever they had, and give the other half to the birthday, or just everyone would give them a drink. Every time you walk around, here, drink out of this. It's your birthday. You'd get sloshed. Now, drunkenness is a crime. So people get called up before the captain once a week, be punished. It was your birthday. An officer would speak up for you. It's so and so's birthday, and he couldn't refuse the givers because that would cause offense. And so he'd be like, well, drunkenness is still a crime. You're going to have to work the pumps, or they'd find some sort of nasty job for you to do, clean the heads. So this guy, so they didn't harvest all the sheep, but they were there to slaughter sheep. And maybe he thought, well, I don't think he thought about staying. I don't think staying in his mind was a possibility. And so here's the thing, why I mentioned the alcohol stuff like that. So on the records of the ship, he was punished on a regular basis. Probably because, I'm guessing, he was kind of a celebrity, you know? Like, he'd come down, like, tell us more about times on the island, you know, and give him a drink. So he's like, he was fucked up all the time. Also, being packed in there with all those guys, and the nature of exploring and working, he was sick and injured a lot, too. And then he came back. I believe, I'm not sure about this part of the story, but I believe he came back, thought he might write a book or something like that, but just ended up just dying in poverty and poor health at an early age. So here's what I'm thinking. What if he would have stayed on the island? You know, what would it have taken? You know, like, here's the thing too, like, the boat comes in, and these, like, seafaring people, like, if you're in need of help, the people of the sea help you out, like, other ships, whatever you need. He could have said, like, I'm glad to see you, I understand you're going to be taking a lot of goats, but, this is where I live now, and I hope that you leave enough goats for me to survive. And also, it would be a kindness if I could have, like, clothes, nails, tools. I'm sure they would have been real generous. He might have even said, like, don't harvest any of the baby sheep or something like that. I bet you there's a shitload. I bet you they would have left him, like, all the things that they have in, like, overabundance, like ship's bread and things like that. They could have left him stores of ship's bread, so that, like, if at any point in time, like, while he was during any crisis, he could, like, you know, draw upon these biscuits that last forever, until the weevils get to them. I guess my idea is, like, what would life have been like him if he would have stayed on the island? I've heard of towns starting, Midwest towns starting for, like, very less of a reason, you know? Like, guys, like, heading west to sell whiskey, and his wagon breaks, and then he just starts selling whiskey out of the back of his wagon, you know, and a town springs up there. And basically why, like, it's not just because the whiskey, it's like, as people travel through, he would get information, and it would be a waypoint. So, like, you head for this person, and then from there he gives you directions further on, or more information. So maybe Robinson Crusoe could have set up his own little town there, his own little store. Like, imagine that. Like, what if he would have traded for, like, lumber and actually built himself an actual house, like a store, and then, like making jerky or whatever, you know, it's the whole thing. Like, imagine a ship pulling up and saying, like, well, you know, instead of killing the goats, which are mine, by the way, I provide jerky for you, and it'll only cost you the things that he needs to live, like extra tools that you might want, the makings for a forge. Like, like, people traveling through that area would start getting that in their mind, like, well, we need to bring an extra anvil, anything that this guy might need to get jerky. I mean, why not? A lot of that would be the cost of doing business for the company and not for the ship's crew. I think it's mindset. I think that he would have been thinking about rescue for so long that rescue would be inevitable for him. As opposed to, like, go eat some chicken, honey. As opposed to, like, maybe a life could be had here. Like, I think it was just, like, a life of isolation would be absolutely unfamiliar to him. It's an interesting idea to think about. I wonder how many goats were on that island. What does a self-sustaining population of goats look like? Starting to rain. I could really use some goats for this yard.